So young people just aren't interested in pocket knives anymore. At least that's what they say. Same goes for wristwatches. Just not going to stick around. And then finally, gold. I mean, young people just don't want this stuff anymore, right? 20 years from now, who's going to buy your gold? That's a question that's been coming up, and I think it has a lot to do with Bitcoin's performance over the last 12 months. If you think back to a year ago, and that's pretty tough to do with everything going on, Bitcoin was a total sleeper asset, and gold seemed like it was the one that was about to enter the super cycle. Now, gold actually performed really well, and it did what it was supposed to do, but it has shared its role as typical inflation hedge with a lot of other commodities. And now it's even doing that with Bitcoin to a certain extent as well. And so the question of what happens to gold 20 years from now really seems to be a question of whether a lack of interest from younger people will phase out gold entirely. And it's a legitimate question, but I think that there's a lot to it that people asking that question might not be thinking about. So I figured I'd cover a few points about Bitcoin's relative infancy and then the simple fact that young people were really never into gold to begin with. Now that's a generalization, of course, but stick with me for a little bit. I'm going to tell you why I say that. First of all, though, selling your gold today is very easy, and I don't see that changing. If you're new to gold and have never sold before, your easiest options are going to be selling to a local coin shop, maybe a jeweler, or I suppose a pawn shop. Personally, I would stick to coin shops locally. And then if you're willing to ship, online dealers like AppMex make it very easy to sell. And then go one step further, if you're a little bit more ambitious, eBay, Reddit, and Facebook groups, maybe even Craigslist, they're going to get you a better price. And then finally, if you have a presence on YouTube or Instagram, you can always sell that way as well. Those are all obvious ways to do it. And in the worst case scenario, you'd probably get spot price for your gold right now. And I don't see any of this changing except that the online platforms will continue to evolve. Now, 20 years from now, there are going to be different platforms. The question of whether gold will fade out of popularity, though, simply because younger generations aren't interested in it, that isn't backed up with any real facts. And I don't really think it was ever a case of age as much as it was a case of a person's place in life. I think it's safe to assume that a young person with a limited amount of investable income is just simply going to be more interested in Bitcoin or Ethereum or GameStop right now, simply because they're seeing quick gains there. Now, I didn't have any interest in gold 20 years ago personally. It wasn't until I began to get ahead that I started thinking about preserving what I was making, rather than just looking for those quick gains. Or quick losses, I guess. I mean, because I definitely had a few of those as well. It was just harder to see out 10 years when there were options that were making moves over the course of weeks. Now, I don't know if it's necessarily an increase in popularity in those things like Bitcoin, or even a decrease in the popularity of gold or silver. Again, I think it has a lot more to do with priorities and available cash. If there's one thing we can say for sure, though, it's that as Bitcoin continues to gain in popularity, it's going to gain more regulations. So it has a chance to become more of a safe haven, but we're nowhere near that today. A lot has to change. It has to change to make it more stable. It has to change to make it more relevant over time. But I'd say gold will continue to be exactly what it is today. Now, I personally like Bitcoin and Ethereum and a lot of other investments right now, and I don't want to put out advice that's going to direct people away from things that they can make some quick gains on. The goal of this channel has never been to give advice that puts people on that hamster wheel or keeps anyone from getting ahead. It's simply to add a little bit of practical color to buying gold and silver. And I felt from the beginning that practicality is pretty rare around here. And there is no hiding that gold is effectively a non-performing asset. But the point of buying gold has never been to gamble on something that's either going to moon or crash. It's to put something aside for future use. And let's just be honest, buying gold or silver is a lot more exciting than simply depositing cash in a bank. I think one of the most important points to remember is that last year was atypical. You cannot extrapolate a trend that's based on atypical conditions. And the cycle hasn't even played out yet. So a correction in gold and silver price doesn't mean they're going away. And Bitcoin can't continue to rocket up without creating value. Nothing's going to stay on the current path forever. And the same goes for general interest and excitement. Precious metals aren't going to fade into obscurity because young people aren't excited about them. Again, I'd say that generally speaking, young people were never really that excited about them to begin with. Now, you won't have to work very hard to find young people who get it, young people who like nothing more than gold or silver, but you'd find a lot more who are barely aware it's a thing. And maybe you can even point to Wall Street Bet's activity on Reddit and think of that as a sign that young people are into silver all of a sudden, and maybe that's true, but, on the other hand, maybe it's just bullion dealers catfishing. We don't really know. We do know that silver requires less sidelined cash, and that makes it a lot easier for a younger demographic to get into it. I personally got into silver before getting into gold. Again, it just costs less. But again, overall, I'd say that precious metals just typically is not a young person's game. And where I'm going with all this is that the question of whether gold and silver will be less valuable 20 years from now because younger generations aren't into it probably is focusing on the wrong evidence. Just because a young person today is into Bitcoin and they don't have any gold does not mean that the same person will operate that same way 20 years from now. I think it's more likely that digital assets will move in on equities and bonds. Now, I know I'm personally investing more money in Bitcoin right now, and that has taken some of my interest away from stocks. I don't know a whole lot about bonds. Honestly, I've never subscribed to the 60-40 recommendation for stocks and bonds. I would say, though, that hard assets fill a different role than any of those three, stocks, bonds, or digital assets. Personally, I want to cover all the bases, and I continue to say that having some hard assets makes it a little bit safer to speculate on trend investments, and I don't see that changing. All right, so I think that's going to do it today. I hope you're all doing well. Let me know in the comments what you're up to and whether or not you think that gold and silver are here to stay. And while you're there, if you found any of this interesting, be sure to hit the like button. That helps get the word out. I always appreciate that, and I appreciate your time. Thank you again for watching. Take care.